All right. So starting from the top, and people will join when they join. Thank you so much for joining and rejoining. And I am super excited to talk to you about something I know a ton about and that I've benefited from and have helped a lot of people benefit from in their career. And that's negotiating off the table, exclusive kind of superstar benefits at work. And this live stream is for you if either you yourself or your kids or people that you mentor are looking to learn about benefits that they should be negotiating for at work that go beyond the typical like 401k kind of stuff, healthcare kind of stuff, which are usually dealt with at the company level. So the truth is, what I didn't know when I was first starting out in my career is there's like one set of standard benefits that everybody gets. But if you're a high performer, there's a whole nother world of benefits that you can start to ask about that you wouldn't even think about if somebody hadn't told you. So thank goodness somebody told me, right? And I pursued HR. So I started to learn a little bit more about this from my day-to-day work. And so that's what I want to share with you. Before we get started though, I do want to say to you that the one conversation we're not having today is around your performance, right? Because the prerequisite for all this stuff is that you're doing decent work. If your work isn't good enough, then we can't have the exclusive benefits conversation. Then we need to have a totally different conversation. And so the one piece I'd share is like, we got to make sure before we even talk about anything special that you're doing the bare minimum. The other caveat I'd give you is that at the end of this live, I'm giving you a script that I've used word for word to negotiate benefits on the job. I didn't put the exact benefit I was negotiating just because it was a little proprietary to where I was working, but I gave an example of like if it was working from home, but with the exact language I used so that you guys can steal that, and that'll be available at the end of the live stream. Okay, so let's get started. You both know me, but if you didn't, I'm Melanie Duppins, and you know I'm the founder of Breaker 28, and it's an organization I started to partner with exceptional and driven women of color and their companies that employ them to help them accelerate their careers. And so in my life, what I've seen as an HR executive for the nonprofit sector, and then also as someone who got to the C-suite pretty early, around 30, is that it's so rare for women of color to be getting the insider tips that we need that will shave years off of our career. And I was fortunate and blessed enough that I had people who were giving me the inside scoop, so to speak. And so it's my mission to give as many women as I can that inside scoop so that we don't have to recreate the wheel and we're not playing with an unlevel playing field. And so that's sort of what we do. So before we dive in, I want to tell you a little bit about the perspective I bring around negotiating salary and benefits. So my first job was actually not a white collar, like a traditional white collar job. I was a teacher. I taught sixth graders in Baltimore City. And when I left the teaching profession to go into the nonprofit sector, I took a pretty big pay cut, like 15 or 20% on an entry-level salary. So I took a huge pay cut. And part of the reason I took such a big pay cut was because I didn't even negotiate anything. Like I didn't know that that was what I was supposed to do. And so if I had negotiated, maybe I would have come in flat, or maybe I wouldn't have gone very far and I still would have had to take a little pay cut. But I didn't even have that option because I didn't know that negotiation was possible. And too often, I think, particularly for women of color, we're hemming and hawing about negotiation because we know we should do it, but we're not sure what to negotiate or how. And I've certainly had that experience. But over the years, I've gotten better at it. And I've helped other people get better at it. And we've gotten much better results for ourselves. And we've been much happier at work, frankly, because we figured out how to do this stuff. So I want to tell you a little bit about why this matters, right? It's not just about the money. It's not just about liking your job a little better. If you had to take a guess for you guys that are here, like how many working years would you say you spend at work? Like if you took your whole career and you made that into 365-day years, would it be 10 years? Would it be 5 years? How many continuous years of your life do you think you're going to spend at work? You can go ahead and chat that in. Would you say 5 years, 10 years? What for continuous years of your working life? How many years are you working on average? So It's 15. The answer is 15 years. Most people spend 15 years, continuous years of their life at work. And so if you think about not having the work schedule or the other benefits that you need for 15 years, in my mind, that's a travesty. That's a travesty, right? And so part of why this matters is because if we can make you 5% happier at work over 15 years, that's a huge amount of happy. And so I want you to just think about that you're spending so much time, continuous years of your life at work. And so if we can even move the needle on one benefit or two benefits over the course of your career, it's going to have a real impact on your family, on you, on how happy you are at work. It's a big deal. I hear you. Yeah, with the choppiness, it's hard to even count how many years you've spent working. Absolutely. So on average, for most people, if you look at, a regular career, 40, 50 years of more than 40 hours a week, frankly, let's be honest, then that amounts to something between 13 and 15 years. All right. So I want to walk you through a couple different sort of things. The first thing I want to talk through are some of these unconventional benefits that I've hinted at, some of which you'd know, but I'll spin them a little bit. And then we're going to talk about, well, how do we choose which ones to negotiate for? How do we negotiate? That's sort of going to be the flow of the rest of our time. So when you think personally about benefits at work, and feel free to type these directly in the chat, and I know there's a little bit of a delay. When you think of benefits at work, what are the things that jump to mind? Go ahead and type them in the chat. So for example, I know people tend to think of like healthcare kind of stuff. What are the benefits that are top of mind for you? And while we wait for that to come in, I'm going to drink some water here. 401k, insurance, absolutely. Pension, yeah, that's a nice benefit. I don't think any of us are seeing that anymore. Most sectors, yes. Retirement, right. That's absolutely true. And those are the standard ones, right? Like everybody gets those. Well, not anymore, but companies decide at a macro level, are they going to give them to all or to none? And that's sort of the harder ones to move. But when I think about benefits as a former HR executive and also as someone who's a little bit scrappy about how I negotiate, I know that there are many more than just those available at most companies. For example, professional development money. So, it's true that tuition remission is really hard to find these days. Like it happens, but it happens much less frequently than it used to. But education stipends or professional development stipends are much more common. So employers can pay up to $5,250 per year for you to take classes, for you to spend on other educational expenses, conferences, etc., before you have to pay taxes on what they give. So if you want to take a certificate program that costs, $6,000, your employer can pay $5,250 of that without any tax burden for you. And, if you're later in your career, this may be less important, but if you're early in your career, those certifications or even $5,200 worth of a degree over 4 years can make a huge difference. And now that New York has, things like free tuition in state, this may be less valuable, but I'll tell you, one of the certificates that I got cost about $6,000, and having my employer at the time front $5,250 of that made a huge difference. Now, what I will sort of warn you here is for employers that offer tuition remission, you just have to be careful about the tax repercussions there. In my master's program, there were 3 people who got free tuition remission because they were university staff, but there were huge tax burdens on them because of it. They were being taxed as if they got that money in compensation. So you just want to be careful if you go above that $5,250, what the tax burden on you is. I think if it's just a little over, you won't feel it. But if they're doing full tuition remission, just be fully aware of the implications of that before you say yes. So I had 3 friends in my master's program that had to live like paupers for 2 years because they were being taxed on $40,000 more of income that they weren't seeing. So just be smart about that. The headline, one benefit that you should absolutely be pursuing. Our certificates, other types of things that your employer will pay for, they can do up to $5,250 a year, so $5,250 a year before you have to pay a dime in taxes. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about is remote work. So we know work from home, that's not new, that's not like very interesting. We've been talking about working from home, telework for decades and decades. But here's something you might not know. Increasingly, star performers are working from other countries. They're doing like workations, right? Where they'll go to Turkey for a year, or they'll go to the Bahamas for 3 months or 2 months, or France for a month. And they're working their standard Western hours in that other country and getting to do some tourism, getting to be around, often for a cheaper cost of living than they would pay here. So if you've got your whole life here, that may not be something you ever want to pursue, but that's a real option for people. So especially if you want to you have a knowledge work job where you really can work from home 2 or 3 days a week, that's a job where you may choose to do like a workish sabbatical where you're away for 3 weeks, 4 weeks of the year, and you're still working normal hours, but you're getting to go to the beach at lunch. That's a real thing. And typically we don't see women ask about that, but I'll tell you, I know personally of 3 dudes under 35 years old who were in middle-ish kind of positions. So they weren't managers, but they were like, strong performers who negotiated that without a problem, without a pay cut, without any issues at all, in different kinds of companies. So not just in like these really techy, googly kind of companies, but in regular ones too. The key thing you need is you need the kind of job that lets you work remotely and still get the job done. So if you're, a police officer, I'm sorry, it ain't gonna happen. But if you're the kind of person who can do a lot of your work at the computer or the phone, then those are the kinds of opportunities that are available. Does that make sense? All right, so I want to talk to you about reduced work schedule. So that's that 60%, 80% time stuff. And I know that law firms and other large organizations have been into that for a while. But the biggest barrier is sometimes you have to take a pay cut to make it work. So for example, I know in my previous company, if you went 80% time, you could absolutely do it. You're just going to get 80% of your vacation, 80% of your income. And for a lot of us, I see you, Sonia, working remotely on Fridays makes a huge difference. I work from home 3 days a week, so I know all about that life. It's a beautiful thing. So if you think about reduced work schedule, a lot of times our barrier is income, right? Because we're like, oh, I can't do 80% of my salary. I can't do it. But really, can you though? Like if you're thinking about what matters to you in your life, in my current situation, I can't do that because my job is so big. I need to be there. I can't do my job in 80% of the time. But if I could, that would absolutely be something I could work my life around if it meant that one day off a week I could spend with my family or do other things that were important to me. And so that reduced work schedule is something that you might want to consider, even if it's just for a short time. So if somebody's ill and you want to spend more time with them, or if you have a family issue, kids need you home more, and you want to reduce your work schedule so that you're leaving every day at 4, those are real options that you can do on a temporary or more permanent basis. All right. So the other thing about reduced work schedule that's super special, and I'm guessing that you all here, because the folks on this call have been working a while, you might know this, but it's the kind of benefit where you get to keep your health insurance in most cases. So unless you're under 24 hours a week, a lot of employers just won't even bother with the healthcare implications and will keep you on your current plan. So you can get to 60% time, 2 days off a week, and still have a full healthcare package. That's really exciting, right? Because it gives you effectively almost half time without having to worry about that healthcare issue. And so I'm not saying that's absolutely true for every employer, but I mean, across the course of my career, I've seen 4 or 5 examples of that being true in different kinds of employers and in the people that I mentor and coach. All right, so we talked about so far tuition benefits, remote work, reduced work schedule, and this is something, the next one is something I personally still use and love. Dedicated work time to develop professionally. Now, at first you're like, wait, but of course they have to give me that. Let me suspend disbelief for a moment. So if you're early in your career, or maybe you want to make a job shift in the next 5 years, you probably have 4 or 5 skills that are standing in your way and that you honestly won't make time on Friday night or Saturday morning to spend time on. You just won't do it. You know that you've got kids, you've got issues, you've got stuff you want to do outside of work. You don't want to work outside of work. And so what I want you to think about is if you could have 4 hours dedicated every 2 weeks to develop that one skill that you need in order to move to the next kind of job that you want. So for example, let's say someone on this call wants to start a nonprofit that helps seniors, right? And they take care of seniors. So maybe there's some skills you need to learn, like development, or writing grants, or something related to building a network so that you can network and sort of make money that way for the organization, or how nonprofits work, whatever it is. If you have 2 hours a week, that's professional development time that you can devote to any skills that are at least remotely tied to your current job, and you can make that link, tenuous as it may be, that's 2 weeks a year. If you get a 2-week vacation a year, that's 50 weeks, that's 100 hours you could spend potentially working towards your next job, either within your current organization or in another organization. The key here would be that the professional development you do has to add value on both sides. So you could argue that learning about how development, raising money works would make you a better communicator or more influential in your current job. Done. Connection made. You're able to spend time on what matters to you. Your employer is getting the benefit of a more influential version of yourself. And in a year, you've spent 100 hours learning something that you can broker to your next opportunity. Hey, Titi Annette, I see you. So that's another opportunity. And I'll tell you, in my career, when I moved from a director level job to a VP level job, there were lots of people who stayed in the director tier. And part of the reason they stayed in the director tier is they spent 110% of their work time. I say 110 because they were working more than 40 hours a week. They spent 110% of their work time on work. They didn't have a moment to come up for air to think about what they wanted to do to develop professionally. Now, I'm not saying I don't work like a fiend, because that would be a lie and people on this call would call me out for it, because I do. But what I will say is every job I've been in for the last 8 years, I've negotiated with my manager outright in a check-in or whenever, at the quarter, whatever it is. Hey, I want to spend a few hours a month working on this skill over the next quarter. I'll keep you apprised to what changes, what's new, what I learned. Do you have a problem with that? To which they say, no, as long as the work's getting done, good for you. And that actually improves my credibility with them because they see that I'm a hustler who's learning, who's growing, and it helps me get set up for the next scale of opportunity that I want. So, that's another benefit that you wouldn't think about, but could add real dollars and cents to your life over time if you think about leveling up strategic skills for your next opportunity. And for those of us that do a lot with volunteer work, whether that's church stuff or organizations on the side, your professional development could span that, right? It could be something that you need for your service work that also benefits your job, and then you're adding value to yourself personally. You're able to give more to the areas that you support in the community, and you're still moving your career forward. All right, so the last real benefit I want to focus on actually there's 2 more that I want to focus on for our time. The next one is flexible work hours. So this is a truly millennial benefit, I'll own it. But for some of us, they really would make a difference if we came into work earlier or we left earlier. And some jobs don't allow for that, right? So if you work in a law firm and lawyers don't get in until 10, you're not leaving at 1 in the afternoon. It's not going to happen. But more often than you think, there are little changes you can make to your commute. So maybe starting later, maybe you're doing 10 to 7 because you don't want to get up early, and that'll help your commute, and it'll whatever. Like those little switches can make a real difference in the quality of life. So I had a woman who worked for me, and she was an HR business partner for me. And she asked me once, and it took me a while because it was a weird request, so I needed to really think about it as her manager. Hey, would you mind if I worked 6 a.m. to 3 p.m.? Sorry, to 4 p.m. She did a long day. I didn't ask her to. She just was relentless like that. And I said, okay. After a while, I thought it through, but she was going to be there during the core business hours. She liked to take a full lunch, which is why the day was a little longer. In our sector, people tend not to take a full lunch. Anyway, so that was better for her because she missed the rush hour. So it might have been 6 to 3. She came in before rush hour. She left before rush hour. And that to her was more important than getting those few hours of sleep in the morning. And as her manager, as long as the work was getting done, I didn't care. And so there may be a little switch in your schedule that would make a big difference for you. And if you can position it appropriately, your manager would be all over it, no problem. So the last one I want you to think about is vacation time. And I know that in big bureaucratic organizations, vacation time doesn't seem like something you can negotiate for. But I'm telling you, that's a lie. There are people who buy back their vacation time who literally pay for it. They say, you know what, I'd like an extra week of vacation a year, and I'd like to buy it. Or they just ask for it flat out in lieu of a salary increase or whatever, because they can get more vacation time than they would be able to afford if they bought it with that salary increase. Or sometimes if you're a high performer, it's just a value add. You ask your boss for it, they negotiate for you, and because they want to keep you around, you get it. And think about the real value of that to your life. If you're able to get even 3 or 4 more vacation days a year that you can spend with your family over the course of your working life, that's a huge difference. And so, vacation, especially if you're the kind of person who gets like PTO and you're always running out, if you're a star performer, there may be ways you can buy back some vacation so that you have more time to spend with the people you care about, and you're not always rushing at work. So there are many more benefits than this. I wanted to give you a spread, so that's why I gave you so many. But if you Google around, take a look. There are more things you can think about in this regard, and it's worth doing, right? Worst case scenario, you find nothing useful, but you've learned a lot. So switching gears, I want to talk to you about how to choose which benefits to negotiate for. So one mistake that I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen it too, since the people on this call have been working a while, is that sometimes folks, they try to keep up with the Joneses. And so as soon as they learn somebody can work from home 3 days a week, that's what they ask for, right? Like they choose what benefits to negotiate for, in large part just based on what they see people do. And that's a huge mistake. Here's why. You've only got so many chips. And there may be something you really want that other person hasn't been smart enough to even think about yet. So I spend zero time competing with other people about benefits. I ask for what I want, what matters to me. And so let me give you a few examples of things that don't matter to me that may matter to you, but that I will never negotiate for. So, I'm not going to negotiate for a flexible work schedule, like starting later or starting earlier. And here's why. I'm crazy boring. 9 to 5, it works for me. It like super works for me. And so I'm not going to, just because I saw somebody else who gets to leave at 3 p.m. because they're doing that flex government time thing, do you. I'm really happy for you. I hope that you enjoy it. And yet I'm never going to compete on that benefit because I don't want it. But if all I'm trying to do is copy what I see them do, then I'm going to miss out on the opportunity to really negotiate for the ones I want. So maybe a reduced work schedule so that I can train for the management center. True story, I have that right now. And I think it's just important that even as you're deciding, I gave you 6 examples, as you're looking through them, just figuring out, if I could only have one of these to start, which is the one that's going to make the biggest difference in my life, and starting there, and not so much figuring out what other people have already sort of greenlit. Another example is this education reimbursement that I told you about. There were many years of my life that I like worked that. I took so much advantage of it. But right now, in starting this business and training for the management center, having a full-time job, doing ministry, I don't got time. I don't have time to be in school. So while somebody else is working on the education benefit, I'm so happy for them, but I am not negotiating for that. Keep it, enjoy. I don't need it, right? And so I'm going to focus only on the one or two benefits I really need and negotiate for those instead. All right, so I've said a ton, and I have one more area that I want to talk through. But before I do, I just want to know any questions coming to mind for you guys, things that are popping up that you want to make sure, related to this call that you get out of it. And since it takes about a minute delay while you're typing, I'm just going to keep talking, but as I see the questions come in, I'll answer them. So what questions do you have related to negotiating for benefits on the job? So while I wait, one thing I did want to flag is, as I mentioned earlier, for some roles, as long as you're in that role, certain kinds of flexibility are just not going to be possible. So, police officers, nurses that are on the floor, they're not going to have an 80% work from home schedule, at least not until virtual medicine's more widely practiced. And so when you're thinking about which benefits to negotiate for, you want to make sure that you're being realistic in terms of the culture of your job. Yep, so I see some folks talking about salary increases. So for those, and I actually may do a whole live stream like this around salary, but what I can tell you now is the key is having an ironclad case for why you should be paid what you think you should be paid. That's market research. You can use glassdoor.com, you can use salary.com, figuring out how to sort of benchmark where your salary is and where you'd like it to be, and to make the case compellingly for why that is. So if you guys are interested, I'd be glad. I'm going to do one of these live streams every month. If the salary topic is interesting, just ping me. I'm glad to do that for next month. But really timing, so making sure that you've sort of queued up the conversation well, and then having a strong case for the value that you bring as compared to the salary you make and how it benchmarks across your industry is really important. Any other benefits sort of questions? All right, so I'm going to keep going, and then if I see them come in, I'll answer them later. So I mentioned to you that before you leave the call today, I'm going to give you a link that will let you download an exact script that I've used before, not for the benefit that I'm talking about in the script. I used it for, I think, tuition remission or some other benefit, but it's still useful. It's one that you can use almost word for word, and you can certainly use the framework for negotiating your own benefits. But before I give you that link, I wanted to tell you that I'm offering through the month of October 10 totally free 30-minute career consultation slots, so one per person. And I'm going to drop a link into the live now. I know some folks are here, but there are others in your life that maybe could benefit from the consultation more than you, or maybe you could. And so I'm going to drop it directly in the live. You have to register at that link if you want a slot, and I literally can only do 10 just because I have like limited time. But in the month of October, I'm gonna make space for 10 free 30-minute consultation slots. So if you want that, please do share it, but don't share it on Facebook. Like, share it individually, because I only have 10, and I would hate for someone who watches the replay and wants to do it not to be able to benefit. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm going to share, I'm just going to put in here above link is for consultation. All right, and then what I'm going to share next is the download link for what I promised, which is the negotiation script. And that's just going to be a Google Doc that you can download. You can't edit it, but you can certainly download it and use it. 1 second, plopping that in here. All right, and that should be accessible. If it's not, just ping me at Melanie at Breaker28, and I'll be sure to email it to you directly. But you should be able to download it. I've tried it a couple different ways, and it should work. All right, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining, and if you have any questions, follow up. My email's in the live, and look forward to seeing you next month. Unless I get another brilliant idea, I'm going to take your idea, Sonia, and make next month's all about salary negotiation. All right, see you guys. Bye.